And by observing them doing their project, answering those questions, answering the design and programming questions, you're really going to get a better feel for how the team has learned and utilized their core values as they go along. So I think it will be a less artificial judging than what it was separately. And just to reiterate, Barb went over how exactly the judging works, but to make sure that everybody understood that fully, as a core value, the team will do all of their judging in one session. And as a core value judge, you will, so the major differences: no separate judging session. And you'll be doing this mostly through observing and listening to the team. How judging works: the team will do all of their judging in one session, and the core value judge will stay with that team. And therefore, if you didn't quite understand it, excuse me, if you didn't quite understand how that works, the other sets of judges will move from room to room and you won't. Your questioning session, if you want to ask specific core value questions, that will come in the middle. And keep in mind, it's just 5 minutes. If you have a team of like 5 or 6 students and you ask one question and they all take 45 seconds to a minute to answer, that's the end of your 5 minutes. So it's not like you can ask a lot of questions during that middle section where the other judges are switching back and forth. So please keep that in mind and think about something that would be really pertinent to ask as from a core value point of view. While you're with the other judges, as was stated, you are allowed to ask questions, but make sure they stay on the topic of what's being asked. So it can be a core value question, but kind of in lines in terms of the project or in terms of the design and programming. Also keep in mind, when you're with the project judge, it'll just be you and the project judge, 2 people. There will probably be more time to ask a question during that 15 minutes than there will be in design and programming. Because when you're with the design and programming judges, there will be 3 of you. So the same 15 minutes, but 3 people, you'll probably have less time to jump in there and ask a question. So just keep those things in mind. The last thing to keep in mind is that you will only see half of the teams in your division. So throughout the judging or after 1 or 2 teams or at the end, you're going to have to meet with the other core value judge in order to deliberate on what order, who's going to get the core value award. Because it's not like we're going to be giving 2 core value awards for each division. We're still only going to be giving 1. So, but you won't have seen all of the teams. So the 2 of you together will have to share your scores, share your deliberations, and try to decide who's going to, or which team is going to be receiving that award. Now, if you're anything like me, I wouldn't rely on memory. I know in order for the scoring. I know Jeannie, and also Jeannie talked a lot about, oh, you could have the scoring thing up on another screen and have this. Well, if you're also anything like me and can't really maneuver that very well, you might want to either print out blank pages of the core value sheets, or in the prep pack, the scoring sheets that Jeannie was showing you, there are blank pages of those, and just take notes the old-fashioned way with pen and paper while you're doing it. before putting them into the scoring sheet. If some of you are really good technology at doing this all at the same time, that's just great. But otherwise, you might want to think about that ahead of time, is printing out some blank ones for yourself ahead of time so that you can just take notes on there before entering the scores. So now we'll just jump right to the core values rubrics. Always remember to have the team identification numbers and names at the top, so you know, yeah, you can remember when you're entering the scores that you're scoring them, putting them in for the correct team. Then in the upper, or kind of in the mid to upper right-hand section here, are 3 of the new awards: the Breakthrough Award, the Rising All-Star, and the Motivate. Now, these can be given by any of the judges in your division, but they are only listed on the core values sheet. So during the deliberation after each team, you need to talk with your project and your design and programming judge to see if they are interested in nominating for consideration the team that you just saw for any of these awards. We kind of look at the Breakthrough Award as that team. If you've judged at the state tournament before, it's that team that's kind of consistent across the board, but doesn't quite rise up to the level of that they're going to be taking first place or anything for any of these awards, but they've been really consistent across the board with all of their scores. The Rising All-Stars, I kind of think of those as the beginning teams that you can say, you know, they may be in beginning and development, but they're so enthusiastic and they really seem to get all of the aspects of FLL, and therefore we think that they're, you know, have a chance to really go far down the road. And Motivate, a lot of times, I think this is kind of like the Spirit Award that used to be given out by the referees, but it's the same thing. They're enthusiastic overall about doing FLL, and just they've worked on this all year. Their enthusiasm shows through. They're excited about showing what they want to do and everything and what they have done. And so that's how I would look at that award. But like I said, remember, this isn't all decided by the core values judge. It's decided by all the judges. So be sure to ask. And by checking this, it just means that they're a candidate to be considered. And just like when we award the judges awards in the deliberation at the end of the day, that's when these would be talked about also. So, but you can mark them on the sheets and the team can see that they were put into consideration for that. It doesn't mean that they received it. It just means that they were considered for it.
I have a question.
Yes.
So we're going to be filling out the 1 through 12, right?
Yes.
But then, so we're going to do a little math and also take over some notes for this as well.
Take over some, what did you say? Or
are we going to also fill out this page?
No, this is the page that we will only fill out those pages that Jeannie showed.
Yep.
And then from that, this is what we'll print out and we'll go back to the teams. That's correct?
Right, that's correct.
Yep, that's correct. This is what this rubric is what
the team
gets generated from what you're entering.
Yes.
And you don't have to do, you don't actually have to do math because the system does the math.
So then, is there going to be a selection for these on that thing too?
No, the selection, you mean for these 3 awards right here?
Yeah.
These selections will be made. So like at the end of the day, when we all come back at judges and we talk about all the teams And at that time, like the head judge would ask us, oh, do you have any people that you would like to give judges awards to?
Mary, I think that she didn't show it, but I think in the scoring software there is going to be a checkbox for those 3 awards as
Right,
well.
right. But if you have several teams that
Right.
have these checkboxes, then you would discuss
Which
which of
one?
those teams would be actually getting the award.
Right.
Because by checking the box, you're just setting them up as a candidate for the award. Correct? Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Okay, so then we go on to the rubrics. Now, if you've done core values judging before, you can see that this has been more simplified than probably any of the rubrics that we have. So we'll just go through one by one. It's the 6 core values. And as you look at each of them, and if you go into the prep pack, you will see that the questions that are asked by the other judges will hopefully you will get answers through there. But we all know that in the prep pack, that is simply a script that people can look at to see if they want to use it. We do not tell the judges that they have to follow a specific script. They have to use a specific rubric, but they don't have to follow a specific script. So one thing that might be good is to talk with your fellow judges, maybe right at the beginning or something, and say, do you have specific questions that you ask, so that as a core values judge, you can kind of tell ahead of time or be prepared for what you may discover based on the questions that they're going to ask. Because if they're not going to ask the specific questions out of the script, which many judges do not do, especially experienced judges, they have the questions that they like to ask, and a lot of times they bring them with them. So reading the prep pack script will help somewhat, but it's, it won't be the exact questions that will be asked. So on Discover, I think that I'm just going to go through these one by one. Discovery, I look at this as how well they have learned the 3 aspects or the skills in all 3 aspects of FLL. Their research, their robot design and programming, what resources were used, how were their building and coding, what were their attachments, how did they, how well did they learn each of these skills? And then in addition to that, how well did they learn the leadership core value, the lifelong skills that they will get out of core values? Communication aspect, teamwork aspect, leadership aspect. And these can be used, these can be observed by how the team answers these specific questions in the other judging sessions. Innovations, the team used creativity and persistence to solve their problem. Did they test and keep improving on their ideas? How well did they use I look at this as the engineering design process. If you look through the research and the design and programming one, it goes practically exactly through the steps of the engineering design process. Did they come up with an idea? Did they test it out? Did they make an improvement on it? Did they retest? And that, so that's what I look at, how innovative that they were. In their research project, is their solution more innovative? How innovative is their solution to their research project? Impact, that's very, during research, how much impact did their solution have on their community based on the community that they chose? Did they share them with their community? Because that would make an even bigger impact. Have people in their community started utilizing the ideas that they've used? This is how they move along from beginning to developing to accomplish to exceeds. How far have they taken their innovative idea and actually put it out there in their community to make an impact and to make a difference. Inclusion, how is the team reacting to one another and treating one another during their session? Are they involving everyone? Do they allow people to speak? Is everyone speaking? Do they not speak over one another? Are they respectful of each other's ideas? Even if the ideas, if they disagreed on the ideas, did they do that respectfully? And how did they resolve those differences when they looked at that? And the same with teamwork. An observation of how they're working together while they're presenting everything. How did they work together? Some of the other judges might ask them, how did you decide to split up the tasks? How did you make sure that everyone had a task to do? Because there's a lot of work that has to be done in FLL. And sometimes you have very big teams. How did you keep everyone busy? How did you keep everyone working? Things like that. And this may be one of those questions that you bring out during the 5-minute session while the other judges are changing. You know, how did you divide up the work? How did you handle conflicts? That may be something that might not be gotten at by the other judges. This could be a good area to ask a specific core value question during the 5 minutes where the other judges are switching. Fun, I always find this a difficult one. We had spirit and enthusiasm, however it was labeled on the other core values sheet. I don't expect all the teams to be laughing and giggling and that's not exactly what we're looking for. It's not like they're having a rah-rah time, but are they showing an enthusiasm for the aspects of FLL and for the research that they are doing? Sometimes they really get involved in how they're helping out with their research. And this comes through in kind of a fun manner. They're just so excited to be working on this and making an impact in the community that they've chosen and stuff. So that's what I look at for fun. Not that like we're all sitting around telling jokes and laughing and having a good time, but they show a real enthusiasm for what they're doing. So those are the 6 core values and how we would be judging them. Any questions about specifically those? Or then we'll move to going across the top.
I have a question.
Yes.
So since, this is all virtual because of COVID, I'm guessing that's going to be a big factor in a lot of teams. Some teams maybe meet in person, some don't, or off and on. Is that going to be like something we should catch in one of these? Just, I don't know, just to kind of gauge across all of the teams, or just if it comes up, it comes up.
Very much so. It's on top of all of this and the fact that they are changing core values so drastically to begin with, then we throw in the virtual world, which I think is going to make it, we don't know. And I don't think they're going to ask teams. Some teams, I think it is going to be allowed that they can show a video of their project. They have to be there and to answer questions about it, but they will be allowed to do that. They might show a video presentation of talking about their robot. We really don't know how each of the teams is going to come across, and I really don't think it's going to be dictated to them how they do have to do this in the virtual world. So it's difficult for me to answer how we're going to be able to do this, because until we actually get to the time when we are going to be judging this, It's kind of a toss-up as to how we're going to be viewing this. Will all the team members be there? Will all of them not? That we can't say at this point.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I'm actually referring to like, how do we kind of judge them based on how they've adapted to COVID? You know, maybe
Oh,
certain questions like, you know, what core values have you had to use due to the challenges with COVID type of thing? And I'm not saying it should be a canned answer. I don't know how much or how little that that will naturally, or maybe it should be asked somewhat regularly, because like you said,
right.
you know, there could be interesting differences with how things are submitted or with who's there, or, you know, technical difficulties. And
as I'm looking at that, I'm really thinking that that could be a good one to ask during that 5-minute time period, maybe more in the lines of how have you, with the difficulties that have arisen doing this virtually, or if you haven't been able to go together, how has your team managed to overcome and work through those difficulties if you haven't been able to be in the same room together?
probably,
But
no.
but you have to be careful of that. You might not be able to ask the same question of every team, because there may be some teams that have been in family groups or whatever that have been allowed to be in the same area together and work as a team like they did before. So not all teams are going to be in the same situation, even in regards to COVID. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, no. Yeah,
It's a great question to ask about
it's
what
gonna be hard to
obstacles.
judge a team.
Yeah. That is going to be that is going to be a good question, and maybe some of these things will arise, and we might have to have some discussions as we go through the judging, as to, especially after the very first one, or this might, or what also it might be is maybe they might be able to have some practice sessions with teams where we can kind of see how some of this may be working out. I know the practice sessions that they just had with the referees, I wasn't involved in any of them, but maybe they discovered how some of these teams have been meeting. And that would be good information to have from those practice sessions. You know, have many of the teams had to be apart? Have many of them been able to be together?
I think asking them what obstacles they had this year is a great question, because you did see all kinds of things during the practice sessions. Whether some teams decided to build 2 different tables or 3 different tables, and then they went back and forth between 3 different robots. And even just how did they, what obstacles, I think is always a great question, no matter what year it is, because sometimes the obstacle is that you drop the robot and you start from scratch again.
Yeah. But this year may get at that more than ever, and it may be a very good core values question to get at. Because it probably would not be asked, I would think, during the other judging. Yeah.
It might not be, but it might come up naturally. Like,
yes,
you know, when we were like, if they ask what was a challenge, it'll probably be like, yeah, well, we couldn't meet together, so we had a hard time iterating our code. So we had to find a good website to be able to store the versions, type of thing.
Right. Yeah. I think that is an excellent point that come up in the judging. So going across the top, as was mentioned, we're going to use the 1 through 12 instead of 1 through 4. And I just kind of look at these as how many people have developed. So let's just take new skills and ideas. When they talk about what skills, is it just how many people are learning, how many skills, and how much of a deep dive is going into them. So exceeds would be that all of the team seems to be, learning new skills in each of the 3 aspects, and they're doing a deep dive into all of them. You may have a team, beginning might be 1 or 2 of the team members learned a lot of coding, 1 learned a lot of, but they didn't really go across the board with all their learning, either individually or across the team. So that's what I look at for beginning, developing, accomplished, and exceeds in all of these with teamwork. Did they all work together? Sometimes you get a team that has a couple of experienced members who have been together for 2 or 3 years, and then they've brought on like 3 or 4 new people. And when you're asking them questions, you can see that they're dominated by the couple of people who have been there for 2 or 3 years, and they haven't been bringing forward the new team members and stuff. So, but if the accomplished ones had worked with the new members and everything and got their skills up to speed to the fact, to the point where they felt, then that would go more into the accomplished and exceeded, that they're all demonstrating the teamwork. They're all speaking, they're all contributing, and like that. So it isn't really, those areas aren't really different than they have been in the past with core values. And once again, they talked over here about the comments. I would use the comments on this side, not only for exceed, but how do you move from one step to another? If you want to say, this could be a next steps column if you're not seeing a lot of exceeds, but you want to write something. And at the bottom, I like to put my comments in 2-part form. So it would be like, great job, not speaking over one another, letting everybody talk and voice their opinions, but think about finding a way to have everyone participate if they're being dominated by 1 or 2 members of the team. So I always kind of like to break it into boy, you did a really great job at this, and this is what could help you a little bit more in that area. So we'd like to see comments over in this area and comments also down in here. And
Mary,
think about, pardon?
This is Barb. Finish your thought, but let's wrap up in the next couple of minutes, okay?
Well, that was basically my thought. So the other thought was just to think about what comments, if you have been a judge in the past, think about what comments you make over and over and try to think up shorthand versions of them. Any final questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Since one judge will be seeing 4 teams, another seeing 4 teams,
Yes.
and there's some subjectivity here, quite a bit. I could just see, like, how is it going to be such that we order the teams correctly? I'm thinking like when the final scores come out, my score of 50 team might actually be better than another judge's score of 60 team. How long do we have to discuss that? And do we then need to talk amongst ourselves and put them all in an order?
You don't have to put them. You don't have to put them all in an order.
Just the top, or?
Just the
Okay.
the top
Okay.
couple of ones. Yes.
Okay.
So, and there should be, and that's why I wouldn't wait until the very end to discuss all 8 of them. I
Mhm.
would kind of talk to the other judge, the other core values judge along the way.
Okay.
Mhm.